They said, "You're the strong one," as if strength meant silence, as if endurance meant I didn't bleed. That's how it began, a dinner, dressed in celebration but served with betrayal, the kind of evening where everyone smiles too much, and the air feels rehearsed. Across the table, her sister sits glowing in the gold of their parents' approval. The air smells of roasted comfort and hidden cruelty. Their mother lifts a glass. "To our girl," she says, and their father adds, "She deserves everything." The word everything lands like a blade. Jeanette freezes. Everything. The money she worked for, her life savings, the years she sacrificed, sleeping on floors, building a business that kept their lights on. All gone, handed over with a smile and a toast. Her father doesn't look at her, he just says it, plain and rehearsed. "You're strong enough to rebuild." She's not. And that's how control works. Not through violence but through guilt. They wrapped the theft in affection. They made her strength her prison. The room echoes with congratulations while her mind collapses in silence. Her sister's laughter becomes the soundtrack of betrayal. The candlelight blurs. The camera closes in, her hand tightening on the glass, her pulse pounding behind her eyes. She wants to scream but she can't. Not because she's afraid, but because she finally understands. This wasn't a mistake. It was a ritual, a reward ceremony for obedience, hers and her sister's. And at that moment, something inside her fractures. Not with rage, but with awakening. She realizes, they never wanted her strong. They wanted her useful. The glass slips from her hand, shattering like her illusion of family. No one moves to help. Her mother just sighs. "Be careful, honey." But the look in Jeanette's eyes says it all. The strong one is done being silent. The strong one just learned how to strike back, quietly. The next morning the house is quiet, but it's not peace. It's the silence after an execution. Jeanette walks through the kitchen where last night's laughter still lingers like a ghost. Empty glasses, crumbs of celebration, the faint echo of her parents' voices calling her the strong one. That phrase, she can still hear it scraping the walls of her mind. It used to sound like praise. Now it sounds like a curse carefully disguised as love. She remembers the first time they said it. She was 15. Her sister had failed an exam, cried for days, and Jeanette had stayed up all night comforting her. Their mother patted Jeanette's back and whispered, "You're strong, she's not." That was the moment the trap was set. Every favor after that, every sacrifice, every time she cleaned up someone else's mess, it was all built on that seed. Strength became expectation. Her silence became currency. Control isn't always shouted, sometimes it's whispered softly enough that you thank the person for enslaving you. That's how families like hers operated. Their power wasn't in punishment, it was in rewriting reality until guilt felt like duty. Her father mastered that art. He'd say, "You've always been independent, Jeanette. You don't need as much as she does." It sounded noble, until you realized it was a sentence of emotional poverty. As she stands in that kitchen now, staring at the empty seat where her sister had laughed last night, something clicks. Her parents didn't steal her money, they stole her role. They cast her as the provider, the responsible one, the emotional scaffolding that held up the family's image. And once the foundation was no longer needed, they shifted their loyalty to the one who worshipped them the most. It wasn't love that guided them. It was control. Control wrapped in affection. Control disguised as care. Jeanette grips the edge of the counter, her reflection in the steel kettle warped and trembling. For the first time she speaks aloud, not to anyone else but to herself. They didn't choose her over me, they chose comfort over truth. And with that sentence, something ancient inside her begins to rise, the kind of strength they never intended her to use against them. Jeanette sat at the old desk in her childhood room, the same one she'd done her homework on, back when she still believed the world was fair. The air smelled of dust and faint perfume, the kind her mother used to wear when pretending to care. She opened the drawer and found a folder, worn, yellowed, heavy with years of forgotten numbers. Her father's handwriting filled the pages, dates, expenses, and notes written like commandments. She ran her finger along the lines and felt her chest tighten. Every time she'd sent money home during college, every transfer, every extra shift she'd worked to help the family, it was all documented, not in gratitude, but in silence. The ledger didn't lie, it told a story her parents never would. Each page screamed the same truth: she was never their daughter, she was their asset, her labor was their comfort, her sacrifices their foundation. The $200K they gave away wasn't generosity, it was the final withdrawal from a lifetime of deposits. She flipped through the records faster, her breath shallow, eyes sharp, the sound of paper cutting through memory like a blade through skin. She remembered the late nights, how her mother called, crying about bills, promising to pay her back someday. She remembered her father's cold reassurances, "We'll keep track, sweetheart." But he didn't. He didn't keep track for her, he kept track of her. Every dollar was a leash, every favor was a chain. Then she found the page that ended everything, the transfer, the one labeled house down payment for Emma. Her sister's name, 200,000 written neatly beside it, no hesitation, no remorse, just a transaction. Jeanette stared at it until her hands shook. That was her life's work turned into her sister's comfort. But beneath the anger, something deeper brewed. A kind of clarity she'd never felt before. For the first time, she didn't feel weak. She felt awake. Her family's entire system ran on obedience and guilt, and she was the only one who'd ever had the power to break it. She whispered to herself, low and steady, "If they treat me like a resource, I'll show them what happens when the supply runs dry." The camera zooms in on her eyes, tired, cold, and alive. The ledger closes with a thud, the sound echoing like a gavel. Judgment Day wasn't coming from heaven. It was coming from her. The night was long, and the house breathed like a sleeping animal, quiet, unaware, soft with ignorance. Jeanette sat in the dark, the glow of her laptop painting her face in cold light. Her pulse was steady now, no more trembling hands, no more tears. The pain had crystallized into precision. Revenge wasn't about fury anymore, it was about balance. She began mapping everything, every account, every asset, every lie her family built on her work. Her father's small real estate ventures, funded by her help. Her mother's boutique, which Jeanette's first paycheck had saved from collapse. Even her sister's education, which her extra shifts had quietly financed. The truth wasn't hidden, it was recorded. All she had to do was rearrange it. Her plan wasn't loud. Loud people get caught. Her plan was surgical, the kind of revenge that didn't burn bridges, it erased them so no one remembered they ever existed. She opened the ledger again and began building what she called the silent blueprint. Line by line, she constructed a system that would expose everything without ever raising her voice. In one folder, she gathered proof of every transfer. In another, screenshots of emails and texts, the ones where her father promised to reimburse her someday. Then came the legal threads, documents she'd signed unknowingly. Paperwork her parents had quietly placed under her name. That's when the realization hit her hardest. They hadn't just taken her money, they had used her identity to secure their comfo. RT. But she smiled. For the first time in months, she smiled. Because everything they built on her back was fragile, and she held the blueprint that could collapse it. The camera zooms in on the reflection in her glasses, spreadsheets, records, and family photos fading under digital light. Her fingers type with mechanical rhythm, not emotion. This isn't rage, this is reclamation. Every keystroke is an incision, every document a weapon sharpened by betrayal. Outside, the world is still. A car passes in the distance. Her phone buzzes, a message from her sister. "Hey, thanks again for understanding. I know it wasn't fair, but you're strong." Jeanette stares at the message, her lips curling slightly, not in sadness but certainty. She whispers under her breath, "Yes, I am," and with that she presses enter. Rain tapped against the window like distant fingers keeping time with her heartbeat. The city outside was asleep, but Jeanette's world was beginning to wake. Every secret her parents buried was surfacing, quiet as a ghost, certain as dawn. She didn't scream, she didn't warn. That's the beauty of storms. They never announce themselves until they're already overhead. Her first move was invisible. She sent a single email to her father's business partner. A polite message wrapped in courtesy lined with poison. Attached were documents proving that half of her father's rental properties had been financed through Jeanette's accounts under false pretenses. She didn't accuse. She simply informed. She knew greed better than they did now, and greed loves a scandal when it smells opportunity. Next, she reached out to the tax board, not as a victim, but as a whistleblower. Years of records, forged signatures, hidden transfers, all delivered under anonymity. Her father's world had been built on borrowed strength, and she had just pulled the foundation out from under it. As she moved through the night, her reflection followed her in every dark window. Calm, expressionless, detached. The same woman who once begged for fairness now looked like justice wearing human skin. Her sister's face flashed in her mind, laughing in that gold-drenched room, believing she was chosen. But Jeanette didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hate was a luxury for the powerless. What she felt now was purpose. clean, cold, unstoppable. She started preparing the third strike, a simple, flawless revelation. She'd gathered screenshots of her father's messages admitting where the money came from, recordings of conversations her mother thought were private. Even the fake invoice they'd made her sign years ago. All of it was ready, waiting, organized into a single folder titled, Inheritance of Lies. The final step wasn't to destroy them. No, Jeanette had something better in mind. She was going to let them destroy themselves, slowly, publicly, without ever realizing who started it. Camera pans to her phone, screen glowing in the darkness. A countdown timer appears, 72 hours. Auto-send enabled. Jeanette leans back in her chair, whispers to herself, "They taught me control. Now I'll show them what mastery looks like." The rain grows heavier. Thunder murmurs in the distance. The gathering storm isn't outside, it's her. Morning came gray and heavy. The world outside didn't know that a dynasty was beginning to die. Jeanette sat at a cafe across from her father's office, sipping coffee as if nothing had changed. But the calm was deliberate. The first wave of her storm had already hit, and she was there to watch the wreckage unfold in real time. Through the glass she saw her father stride into the building, confident, unbothered, carrying the same arrogance that used to silence her. Minutes later his phone rang. She knew exactly what that call was. His business partner, the one who'd received her email, had wasted no time turning information into leverage. Betrayal travels faster than truth, and greed never misses a chance to profit. Jeanette didn't semi. She simply stirred her coffee, watching the small whirlpool form in the cup. That was how control worked, one tiny motion creating a chain reaction that could swallow everything. By noon her father's office was in chaos. The whispers had begun. Whispers about forged accounts, misfiled taxes, and the family funds that didn't quite add up. She'd timed it perfectly. While the company scrambled to protect its name, Jeanette's anonymous report reached the tax division. She didn't need to appear. The system would do the dirty work for her. All she had to do was watch. Across town, her sister's world cracked next. The bank called about the down payment, the gift their parents had proudly transferred in her name. But the funds weren't as clean as her parents had promised. A flag appeared. An inquiry was launched, and suddenly, that beautiful house her sister boasted about didn't look like security anymore. It looked like evidence. Jeanette walked home slowly, her boots splashing through the thin layer of rain on the street. Each drop felt like punctuation, a rhythm marking the unraveling of everything that once held her captive. For the first time, the world felt balanced. Not kind, but fair. When she reached her apartment, the timer on her laptop read 48 hours. The next set of files was queued for release, this time not to officials but to the public. Every lie, every transaction, every whispered manipulation, set to expose itself automatically. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You built your empire on my silence. Now you'll learn how loud the truth can be." The first call came at dawn. Her sister's name blinked on the phone screen, desperate, trembling. Jeanette didn't answer, she just watched it ring, once, twice, then stop. Silence returned, followed by another call. Then another. By the fourth, she picked up. Her sister's voice cracked through the speaker. "Jeanette, what's happening? The bank froze my account. They said there's an investigation, something about fraud." The panic in her tone was real, raw. For a moment, Jeanette almost felt the old instinct, the urge to comfort, to save, to fix. But that reflex had died the night they handed her money away and called it fair. She listened quietly as her sister rambled about lawyers, about embarrassment, about how their parents weren't answering her calls. Then came the words that made Jeanette's jaw tighten. "Mom said you'll help. You always help." That sentence, those 4 words, were the entire sickness of their family distilled into one plea. You always help, because she always had. Because they had built their lives on her reliability, her endurance, her silence. Jeanette spoke slowly, her voice low and controlled. "I did help, for years, you just never noticed." The silence on the other end stretched, fragile and cold. Her sister stammered something about misunderstanding, about how none of it was meant to hurt her. But Jeanette didn't argue. She had outgrown explanation. Some truths didn't need words, they needed consequences. Later that day, photos surfaced online, screenshots, documents, whispers in business circles. The Inheritance of Lies folder had done its work. Her father's name appeared on financial forums, her mother's boutique tagged in scandal threads, and her sister's dream house exposed as being built on stolen savings. The golden child's shine was gone, replaced by the dull metal of truth. Jeanette sat on her balcony, watching the evening fall over the city. Her sister's calls had stopped. Her parents had gone silent. Somewhere inside, a small ache still lingered. Not regret, but recognition. The same blood that betrayed her now begged for mercy she no longer had to give. They wanted a strong one, she whispered. They got one, just not the kind they expected. The wind carried her words away, scattering them like ashes over the skyline. The golden child had fallen. And the family that once fed on her strength was beginning to starve. Night again. The air was heavy, electric, the kind that hums before something breaks. Jeanette stood before her bathroom mirror, the faint light flickering above her. Her reflection stared back, calm eyes, hollow cheeks, the face of someone who had finally taken back what was hers. But beneath the calm, there was something else. The quiet question that always comes after victory, what now? She turned on the faucet, let the cold water run and whispered, "They took everything. I took it back. So why does it still hurt?" Her reflection didn't answer. It only watched, the same way it had for years, through every apology, every manipulation, every betrayal disguised as love. For the first time, Jeanette realized that this was never just about money. It was about power. The invisible contract of obedience she'd signed long ago without ever touching a pen. She saw it clearly now. Her family was a microcosm of something much larger, a system, a structure that rewards silence, punishes independence, and calls control love. And every time she obeyed, she had fed that system. But not anymore. She wasn't here to burn the world down, she was here to stop feeding it. The camera lingers on her face as the water drips from her hands. Her voice grows quieter, steadier. Freedom isn't about revenge, it's about refusal, refusing to play the role they wrote for you. She wipes the mirror clean with her palm, and for a split second her reflection looks different, taller, older, colder. A version of herself that's no longer chained by the need to please. And now, this is where you, the viewer, must decide what kind of strength you carry. The world will call you strong when you suffer quietly, when you accept unfairness and smile through it. But that's not strength, that's conditioning. Real strength is clarity. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're the strong one, I want you to pause, breathe, and claim your identity again. Comment the phrase "I choose clarity" twice below, once for the person they tried to control, and once for the one who's finally awake, because that's how we break their system, by remembering who we truly are. The mirror flickers. Her reflection smiles, not with triumph, but with peace. The storm is no longer outside, it's inside her, calm and eternal. Days turned into weeks, and the world that once stood so proudly around her parents began to rot from the inside out. Silence became their prison. No explanations, no statements, no press releases, just headlines that multiplied like fire across the internet. Family empire under investigation. Fraud allegations against local businessman. Boutique financed through illicit funds. The news never said Jeanette's name. She didn't need the credit. The truth carried its own signature. Her father's office shut down within a week. The partner who once toasted him at dinner now spoke to reporters with practiced sorrow and convenient ignorance. Her mother's boutique windows were covered in brown paper, the same color as the lies she once dressed in luxury. Her sister, the golden one, deactivated her social media and vanished into silence. And that silence, that's what struck Jeanette the most. The same people who once filled rooms with laughter and control had nothing left to say. Jeanette walked through the city one afternoon, unnoticed in a crowd of strangers. On a billboard above her, she caught the flicker of a news headline about the investigation. The irony almost made her laugh. All those years she had been invisible while giving everything she had, and now the world was finally seeing them for who they really were. She stopped at a crosswalk. The rain had just ended, and the reflection of the world shimmered across the wet street. She stared into it, seeing her own face mixed with skyscrapers and clouds, realizing something profound. Revenge wasn't the end. It was a mirror. It showed her what she'd been aped by and what she had outgrown. But power was a dangerous teacher. For every secret she exposed, a darker part of her wondered, how easy would it be to stay in control now, to become what she'd destroyed? The temptation was there, soft and whispering, promising a kind of godhood. She looked up at the gray sky and exhaled slowly. "No," she said softly, "that's their legacy, not mine." The storm outside had ended, but inside her, the quiet was sharper than thunder. She didn't need to shout anymore. Her silence was enough to make the guilty tremble. It was early morning when Jeanette finally returned. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of color that swallows sound. The old family house stood at the end of the road, its once perfect hedges untrimmed, the white paint peeling like forgotten memory. For a moment she just stood there, the same gravel crunching beneath her shoes that once echoed under her father's expensive car. Time hadn't changed the house, it had only stripped away its illusion. She stepped through the gate, her footsteps steady, her breath calm. The air smelled of dust and faded perfume, the ghosts of Sunday dinners and broken promises. Inside, the silence was suffocating, the walls still carried faint outlines where pictures once hung, her parents smiling beside her sister, the family that preached perfection while feeding on control. She touched the wallpaper and felt something shift inside her, a pulse, not of pain, but of recognition. This wasn't her home. It was the museum of who they wanted her to be. In the dining room, the long oak table still sat like an altar. She remembered every dinner there, her father's measured tone, her mother's practiced warmth, her sister's laughter gilded in entitlement, and her own silence, the silence they mistook for gratitude. Jeanette pulled out the same chair she'd sat in that night, the night they said, "Your sister deserves everything." She ran her fingers across the table's surface. Her voice when it came was low, steady, and free of anger. "You taught me to give, but you never taught me to stop giving." She placed a single envelope on the table. Inside was a letter, not of apology, not of confession, but of truth, a record of every transaction, every hidden decision, every manipulation she had endured and corrected, not for them, but for herself. The house creaked as if listening. The wind pushed through the broken shutters, scattering dust across the floor like ash. She looked around one last time, the chandelier dim, the room hollow, and smiled faintly. "You can't haunt me," she whispered. "You're already gone." As she walked out, the morning sun broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. The light hit her face, not as a symbol of forgiveness, but of finality. She didn't need closure from them, she had already rewritten the story. Freedom, she learned, doesn't come with music. It comes with silence. Heavy, unrecognizable silence. For the first time in years, Jeanette woke up without someone else's expectations pressing against her chest. No morning messages from her father about responsibility, no veiled guilt from her mother about family loyalty, no comparisons, no debt, just air, clean, sharp, and terrifying. She moved into a small apartment overlooking the river. The kind of place where you can hear your own thoughts echo. At first, she filled the quiet with work, writing reports, building new plans, keeping her hands moving so her mind wouldn't wander back to the empty house. But freedom has its own gravity. It pulls you into reflection. One evening she sat by the window, the city lights blinking like distant promises, and for the first time she let herself cry. Not out of sadness, but confusion. She had fought so hard to escape control that she'd forgotten what to do with peace. Revenge had structure, a purpose, a rhythm. Freedom was shapeless. It demanded that she define herself again, without their narrative to resist, her me. Entor's voice, the one she'd once sought in old recordings about power and control, echoed in her mind. Most people mistake rebellion for freedom. They forget that after the fire you must build something new. Jeanette understood now. Destroying the system wasn't enough. She had to rebuild herself without it. That realization scared her more than any confrontation ever had. She started small. Mornings by the river. Letters to herself, not her family. Writing down truths she had never said aloud. "I am not the strong one. I am the one who survived pretending to be strong." And slowly, the emptiness began to change shape. It became space, open, sacred, alive. She began to see that freedom wasn't light, it was a kind of darkness that didn't suffocate. It expanded. It whispered. It waited. She closed her eyes, exhaling the last ghost of their power over her. "Freedom," she whispered, "is the weight you choose to carry when the world stops telling you who you are." It began quietly. As all revolutions do, Jeanette didn't plan to speak. She never wanted to be seen again. But the truth has a way of resurfacing, like an ember refusing to die beneath the ashes. One night, while scrolling through social media, she stumbled upon a post. A young woman pleading anonymously about her family stealing her savings, about being silenced in the name of love. The words hit too close. It was like reading her own diary rewritten by a stranger. For hours, Jeanette stared at the screen. Then something inside her shifted, not out of rage but out of duty. For the first time she understood that her voice wasn't just her own. It belonged to everyone who had been told to stay quiet for the family. She opened her laptop, The glow of the screen lit her face the same way the dining room chandelier once had. But this time she wasn't beneath it, she was above it. She began to write. Not names, not confessions, but truths, universal, stripped of faces. She wrote about financial manipulation disguised as care. About how control wears perfume and calls itself protection. About how loyalty, when weaponized, becomes a leash. She published it under a pseudonym, The Daughter Who Kept the Books. The article spread like wildfire. Within days it reached thousands. Messages flooded in. People from every corner of the world confessing the same story under different names. A chorus of hidden pain, finally echoing into light. Jeanette watched in silence as the world began to whisper what her family once silenced. Every word she'd written carried weight, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Then came the interviews, the requests, the spotlight she never asked for. She didn't accept any of them. Instead, she recorded a single voice message, calm, measured, haunting. It played over a black screen on her anonymous page. They called it family. I called it control. But names don't matter anymore. What matters is that we remember, silence is the oldest currency of power. Stop spending it. That line became a movement. People started tagging her words, writing them on walls, whispering them at protests and therapy sessions alike. Stop spending silence. She had become what her family feared most, a woman who spoke truth without asking permission. Freedom, as Jeanette was beginning to learn, doesn't erase the past, it magnifies it. Every quiet night, when the world settled into stillness, the ghosts of her lineage returned. They didn't scream or beg, they whispered. Subtle, persistent. Like echoes trapped in her blood. She could still hear her father's voice in her head, the tone he used when he wanted obedience wrapped in gratitude. Everything I did was for you. But she knew now. That was the language of control, not love. Yet knowing didn't make the voice disappear. It lingered, shaping her thoughts in ways she didn't fully see. One evening, she sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by the letters she had written. And to herself. Pages of truths and confessions. She began to notice something disturbing. Even in her freedom, her words still circled around them. Her family, her pain, her defiance. She wasn't writing about herself. She was still writing in reaction to them. The realization hit her like cold water. I've built my freedom inside their shadow, she whispered. It was then she understood the cruel genius of legacy. Even when you escape the people who control you, their shape remains carved into your silence. They teach you how to think, how to rebel, even how to define peace. And unless you burn the blueprint, you're still living inside their design. Jeanette rose, pacing. Her reflection in the window followed her, not as a friend but as a rival. The city lights trembled on the glass, turning her face into something half real, half memory. She realized that if she didn't confront this shadow, she'd become the same force she fought against, just inverted. Control wearing the mask of liberation. She took one of her old notebooks, the one where she had tracked every wrong, every manipulation, and without hesitation, tore it apart. Page by page, she fed it to the flame of a single candle until only ash remained. The air filled with smoke, the scent of release and decay intertwined. You don't win by destroying them, she said softly, watching the ashes drift upward. You win by not becoming their echo. And in that moment, something shifted. The shadow didn't vanish, but it bowed, as if acknowledging her sovereignty. The war was no longer between her and them. It was between her and what they left behind inside her. There comes a moment after the ashes settle, when the silence no longer feels empty, it feels sacred. That's where Jeanette found herself. Not reborn in glory, but in stillness. She didn't wake up one morning transformed. It happened quietly in the rhythm of small choices that didn't need an audience. The way she brewed her coffee, the way she opened the blinds and let light fall across her scars, not to erase them, but to study them like scripture. Freedom, she learned, wasn't loud. It was precise. It was the discipline of no longer reacting. One afternoon she walked to the park by the river. The same river that had once reflected her confusion. Now it shimmered like an old friend who had been waiting all along. Children laughed in the distance. Strangers passed by. And for the first time she felt no envy, no ache, only presence. A man sitting on a nearby bench recognized her from an article and approached, hesitant. You're her, aren't you? The one who wrote about silence. She smiled faintly. I was, she said. Now I just write about beginnings. He nodded, unsure what to say. But that simple exchange held everything she needed, proof that her story had done its work. The message had escaped her, evolved beyond her pain. It belonged to the world now. And she? She was free to live again, quietly, without performance. That night she lit a single candle on her desk, the same way she had when she burned her past, and began writing again. Not about revenge, not about loss, about possibility, about what it means to be unchained from both victims and villains. Her handwriting was calm, deliberate. Rebirth isn't a miracle, it's a decision, the decision to stop waiting for closure and start creating meaning. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, distant but gentle, like applause from the universe. She closed her notebook, leaned back in her chair, and exhaled deeply, a breath that felt like years leaving her lungs. "I forgive the silence," she whispered, "because I've learned to fill it." The camera lingers on her candlelight, no longer flickering but steady. The flame doesn't symbolize survival anymore. It symbolizes creation, the kind that doesn't need an audience, only truth. The story ends where all true transformations begin. In the quiet after the storm, Jeanette sat once more by the river, that endless mirror of everything she'd been, and everything she'd become. The city behind her pulsed with noise and light, but here, it was only wind and water, and the faint hum of her own heartbeat. There was no anger left, no revenge to feed, only understanding, raw, unembellished, almost holy. "They said my silence was weakness," she whispered, "but silence is only dangerous when you don't own it." She closed her eyes and let the memories pass through her like ghosts finally granted permission to leave. Her father's voice, her mother's sighs, her sister's laughter, they drifted into the current, dissolving. What remained was truth, and truth was simple. Everything she had lost had made space for everything real to enter. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about excusing. It was about refusing to carry the infection of someone else's corruption any longer. To forgive was to disinfect, to cleanse, to make room for evolution. She pulled out one last page from her notebook, the same kind she once filled with strategies and pain, and wrote her final lesson, slowly, deliberately. "Revenge will wake you. Forgiveness will free you. But only truth will make you whole." She folded the paper, pressed it between her palms, and let it fall into the river. The current caught it instantly, carrying it downstream, where her story would dissolve into thousands of others, unseen, but eternal. Then she stood. The light shifted, wrapping her silhouette in gold. She wasn't the victim anymore. She wasn't even the avenger. She was something else now. Something unshakable, unnamed. She turned toward the camera one final time, her voice calm, direct, and commanding. "If you've ever been told your pain doesn't matter, remember this. They only say that when they fear your awakening. The moment you see the pattern, you break it. The moment you stop waiting for their approval, you become untouchable." A long pause. The river hums like breath. Then her final words. "The devouring force isn't vengeance, it's truth, and once it touches you, you never go back."